Pete, this is an effect you call the Midas touch, and there's been many variations of similar tricks, but this is your take on it, your work on it, and you've dedicated a lot of time, and it's sort of moved in different directions over the years, and this is where it is now, and I think it's in a great place.
Do you know, I've said this a couple of times with a few things. One question I get asked all the time is, when you're performing, what's your go-to effects? You know, what series of effects do you go to? And this has had, hands down, I'd say, the best reaction of any other effect that I've ever done. It takes ideas that were created by other people and merges them together with my own touches, my own language, my own thought processes, and then it's come out, I think, relatively well. Yeah. You know, it's one of those that when I initially put this out in a limited booklet, like a limited run, and the very few people, I think there were maybe 50, so it's not a lot, who got hold of it, all synonymously went wild about the method. I remember showcasing this for the first time. I mean, I'd created this maybe 15 years ago. I'd used it for 5 years, and we were in a curry house there were like Jared Manley, Mark Shandau, a few other people. This is 10 years ago, and they were like, oh, you've got a version of it. I'm like, yeah, but you know, I don't know if it's got any benefits over the original. And at the time, I was sort of, I wasn't confident in the stuff that I had. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, I'm stacking this up against Banacheks, or I'm stacking this up against the Oars, or anything like that. I didn't really want to. When you're up against those giants, it's very easy to feel a little bit sort of like, oh, I don't want to show anybody what it is that I'm working on, because two of these greats that are creating this stuff. Anyway, I showed them it, and they went wild, and I realised at that point, oh, I might have something here. And then years and years and years of working it, and here we are. So this is the first time that this has ever appeared in video form. I have lectured this at a few events. Burglass saw this, and Burglass were like absolutely incredible, wonderful. Several other people, you know, like names in the industry, have looked at it and asked for permissions to use it in television shows and stuff like that, and I've always denied any use of it on television and stuff. And the reason that I've sort of denied use for it is because I've always wanted to sort of wait for the right time before I said, now's the time it's going to appear on video, and I wanted to be the first to put it onto video. Yeah. So here we are.
Well, I mean, before we go into it, I think there's several things you've added to it and made your own, but one of the things that I think's the best is how you kind of sew it all up at the end and clean it up completely.
And everybody can talk. I mean, just as a disclaimer, if you're watching this, you're one of either the lucky 500 that got the set early, and therefore you're getting this as a limited release on its own that's added to this for being one of the first 500, so thank you for rushing out to get that. And if you've bought this separately, also thank you for buying it separately. I can promise you, before you've even dived into learning how this works, this is more than worth what you've paid for it, because, you know, over the last however many years it's served me. As I say, it's always been the most talked about thing.
No props required. It can be done almost anywhere, anytime. It's yeah.
Well, this and another thing, just not to go off on too much of a tangent, but this is in 2 situations or 3 situations. When I went to Hollywood, I went out there with a guy called Gabe Abelson, and Gabriel is a writer in Hollywood, and we went around 13 companies, big companies like Lionsgate, LEG, Triage, ITV International, and I used this in the pitch meetings for a television show over there, and 12 of the 13 companies within the space of 24 hours got back to us to go for a second meeting or offer us something. And we signed with one company, and if you've ever worked in television, you know the logistics of stuff, all the time, paperwork, and then Thanksgiving comes. And anyway, but it would this effect, and I came to England when I went over to ITV in Salford, and this effect again was the thing that I showed, and people just went nuts for it. Yeah. You know, and so it's my version of PK touches. PK stands for psychokinetic touches, or psychokinesis, which is moving something with the mind or affecting something with the mind. And I remember reading Banachek's version years and years and years ago, and there were a few things in it when I learnt it that were problematic. So you've watched the performance at this point. Let me tell you what were problematic and what I had to, for myself, I mean, I'm sure Banachek and everybody else pulls this off wonderfully, and they probably don't run into the problems that I do. But it's because I've run into those problems that I've fail-safed the method. So the first thing is, the problem when you say to somebody, did you feel me touch you? And they go, no. Which is, because then everyone's watching you like a hawk the second time you go back and you're doing all this aura cleansing or whatever it was that were in the original PK Touch booklets, the Banachek ones. The second thing was at the end, whenever you were doing more than one touch, you could never clarify the places that were touched. That were another thing. The third thing I found was that there was never definitive on the amount of taps. So like all of them had happened, but there'd be a time delay, and it wasn't very clear when they were happening. And people would go, yeah, I felt him touch me on my arm or whatever. But then I wanted something that was real time, and it seemed like the spectator were clarifying each of the moments that the touches were happening. So it starts out by first applying a secret touch. And I use Luke Jamay's invisible tap for this that he uses in touching on Hoy, because I always found that was the best version of this. But you could still use this if you're using an invisible thread. You could still do the Banachek aura cleansing. But I found that Luke Jamay's touching on Hoy was the thing for me that made it perfect and seamless. So let me talk you through that. So the way that this is set up is Mark would be sat here and the spectators would be here. And again, I talked about on this project, sometimes people say, oh, you can't do this surrounded. I have done this surrounded, but you're the one that controls where your audience stands, and you're the one that controls your performance environment. And there's a power to be said when you're moving people around. When you say, if you could just stand here for me and just everybody take a step back, you'll understand why in a second. It's perfectly justified to move everybody out of the way in a routine like this, because you don't want people behind or near. Yeah. And so Jamay's touching on Hoy is quite simple. You'd have one person that would be seated like this. Now you can do this standing. It's not preferable to do it standing, which is the exact opposite again of the Banachek PK touches, because the Banachek PK touches, it were preferable to be standing but not seated. I prefer seated. I have done this many a time standing, seated, surrounded, but you just got to have balls of steel to do it surrounded. So your audience are here. Mark would be sat down, I'd be stood up. I'm not going to stand up just because we're on camera. I could be seated, but it makes no sense. The performer has to be standing. So at this point, I'd say now there's a few things that are important, Mark. In a moment, you're going to feel me touch you. And all you've got to do is remember where you felt me touch you. So for example, now this is the first key moment in the effect. Please pay attention here, because this is the most key moment needed to wrap this up at the end. For example, if you feel me touch you here, remember it. If you feel me touch you here, remember it. But obviously from this point. Yeah. Now I use the word obviously from this point. So that suggests to everybody else, ignore those taps, but the obviously is going to play an important role later on. So now I go, okay, so in a moment, Mark, when I snap my fingers, I want you to close your eyes. Now, it's integral to know the participant's name. If you don't know the participant's name, you can't perform this effect. If you're not good at remembering names, take a piece of sticky tape and stick it on them with their name on it. It doesn't matter, you need to know. Because when you're asking questions, you don't want to be going, with your eyes closed. You don't want that. You've got to know the person's name. So you go, Mark, in a moment when I snap my fingers, I want you to close your eyes. I don't want you to say anything out loud unless I ask you a specific question. And I don't want you to open your eyes unless I ask you to open your eyes. Okay. So just to recap, and I know that I'm going over this steady and slowly, but it's important. Firstly, any touches you feel, remember. For example, if you feel me do this, remember it. If you feel this, remember it, but obviously from this point. Now, Mark, in a moment, I'm going to snap my fingers. I want you to close your eyes. I don't want you to say anything out loud, and I don't want you to open your eyes unless I ask, and only answer out loud if I ask you a question. So now I move into the secret touch. So I'll say, so just imagine a ball of light here. Now, I added this bit. You know, Jamay's is just close your eyes and then move into this. Because it's hypnosis-esque, this, I used to do this induction with a ball of light where I'd ask them to keep imagining it floating up and just stopping, and it'd go up to beyond their eye line so that their eyes would start to get tired. Now I just do this. So just imagine a ball of light here as it follow it up with your eyes. And when I snap my fingers, close your eyes down, Mark. So close them down now. And I do this. So that looks like one of the inductions we've discussed earlier. So I'd say now there's something that's most important. Keeping your eyes closed, Mark, that Mark genuinely can't see us. Now you can open your eyes for a second, Mark, but we'll pretend Mark's eyes are closed. What I do now is I come in, I'm stood up, and watch the performance back. You'll see this moment. I lean in and I go to check Mark's eyes are closed, and I do this, right? So 1, 2, this. What that suggests to everybody else is that Mark can't see me. But what I'm actually doing is when I go like this, I'm tapping Mark on the back of his left shoulder blade. So almost where the shoulder blade meets, and I go just here. But the way that I do it is I go quite firmly, 1, 2, hard tap. Again, this hard tap is pinnacle. It's important. So the way it looks is
so
this.
it's 2 firm, but then 1 hard.
Yep, so I go, so close your eyes and actually close them. Now it's essential that Mark genuinely can't see us, and he can't, right? And that's it, and I'm done. As soon as I'm doing this motion here, and my body's here, blocks 1, 2, 3, right? And then I say, keep your eyes closed, Mark, and now I walk away. So you can keep your eyes closed, so you can open them up. So now I've walked away. Now, please remember to this point what's happened. And if it starts to get confusing, because there is a lot going on, let me know, right? But there's a few things that are important to mention before we go any further that will also help you remember the effect. Notice how I said to Mark, anywhere you feel me touch you, I want you to remember. So if you feel this, remember it. If you feel this, remember it. Well, there's a reason for framing it up as a memory test, because the question that I'm about to ask in a moment where I tap somebody else and I say to Mark, did you feel me touch you? Mark's going to say yes, because he don't want to appear stupid, because he doesn't know I tapped him secretly. He thinks everybody can see me tapping him, right? So it means that they're not going to say, no, I didn't feel anything, because there's a specific pressure for them to remember the taps and how many times, right? So now I walk away and I use this sentence. Now again, this is a pinnacle sentence, and all the scripts in this effect are really important. I say, you can tell by the sound of my voice that I'm not next to you now, correct, Mark? Mark goes, yes. And I go, and I'm not touching you now, Mark, no? And he goes, no. And then I go, tap. And I tap the person in the middle of the head once.
The other spectator.
The other spectator, somebody else, not Mark. So I'm away from Mark. Mark, you could tell by the sound of my voice I'm not next to you now, correct? And I'm not touching you now.
No.
Bang. But you did just feel me tap you. So now Mark responds to the tap that he felt here just a moment ago. But the brilliance is that this has made this real time now, because I'm going, I'm not touching you now. No. Bang. But you did just feel me touch you. Yes.
Yeah, so there's some ambiguity with the just and the word now.
That's it.
That in the person with their eyes closed mind, they're responding to a question about the previous event and the tap.
That's it.
To everybody else, they assume that they're answering these questions.
Don't leave like 30 seconds in between. It's got to be bang, 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 walk away, keeping your eyes closed, Mark. You could tell by the sound of my voice I'm not next to you now, correct? Correct. I'm not touching you now, no. Bang, but you did just feel me touch you. Yeah. Yes. Good. Yeah. Perfect. Keeping your eyes closed, I'm going to ask you a few more questions about your feelings. Now, feelings is one of the most interesting words in the English language because it's situational relevant. So, for example, it can be past and present tense relevant. To us that are experiencing things in the present, feelings are what's happening now. Whereas to Mark, feelings means past tense, and which is great because then Mark thinks that I'm always referring to those past feelings. So now what I do, and this again is pinnacle, is I'll tap somebody on the arm twice. I'll go like this, somebody else, the second spectator. I'll go bang, bang, and I'll go 2. And I'll go. So I'm going 2 or 3, right? So I'm like that. Now there's a reason that I do that, because I know I tap Mark 3 times. I know that. But by going bang, bang, I go like that. When I say to Mark, out of interest, Mark, when you just felt me tap you, and this is the line, And if you're torn between two numbers, tell us the two numbers. How many times did you just feel me tap you? And I use the word just again. So now Mark might say 2. Well, if Mark says 2, that's a hit. If Mark says 3, that's a hit. If Mark says 2 or 3, that's best case scenario. That were another problem with PK touches. You tap them a couple of times and go, how many times did you feel me touch you? And they go, I don't know, 3 times, 4 times, twice. They don't know. So I thought by me applying the ambiguity there and going, it covers all bases, because you definitely know I touched you more than once. If you said to me 5 times, I'd go like 2, 3 is 5. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm going like that. I'm like, so it's ambiguous at that point. So now what the audience has seen is me do a real-time touch. Then they've seen me do 2 more touches. But pay attention to where I did those touches. You remember right back at the beginning, the example I did where I say, if you feel me touch, you remember it. So if you feel this, you remember it. If you feel this, you remember it. But obviously from this point, well, they're the 2 places that I just touched the second spectator, which is going to play an integral role down the line. Now, if you're having trouble, rewind this, play it back, watch the performance. There's going to be a lot of going backwards and forwards, but I promise you, it's worth the work, right? So now I say, open your eyes for me a second, Mark, and just relax, shake yourself off. So Mark shakes himself off, and I say, you're comfortable? Yeah. Are you happy for me to ask you a few more questions about your feelings? Again, past tense, to you, to us, we're talking about now. So Mark thinks he's going to be answering questions about the touches he felt earlier because he's felt nothing else since. Mm-hmm. So I say, take a deep breath in. But I'm over there now when I'm doing this. Take a deep breath in and just close your eyes down again. So Mark could close his eyes again. So now here's the piece of brilliance that ties it all up. And now to the second spectator, not Mark, take my finger and I push it into the shoulder blade where I tap Mark. And I go like that, and I go, keeping your eyes closed, Mark. Again, just a little reminder. Obviously, you felt me touch you. No, wait a second. I go, first I ask, the last tap you felt, Mark, how did it feel different to the taps that come before it?
Felt harder, firmer.
So now, because I did, which is 1, 2, 3, like he goes, oh, it felt firmer, a little bit harder, which is true. They're going to remember that. To everybody else now, when I've touched him in the shoulder blade and gone like that, it solidifies that. But here's the moment where it just cleans everything up. Obviously, Mark, I touched you in your head and your arm, but can you tell us all where you felt that firm tap?
Yeah.
And then now he's going to point to his left shoulder blade. But what I do before that, one little thing I do in performance, is just before, I go like this, and I go, and the reason I do this and then this is because some spectators will go like this and some spectators will go like that, and it just covers both bases. Right, I'll go like that. So now when Mark shows us, it's this. But listen to that line. Obviously, Mark, I touched you on your head and your arm. So now Mark thinks to the example right at the beginning.
Because it was obvious when you touched me there.
That's it, yeah. Obviously, Mark, I touched you here and here. Where did you feel that last firm tap? Shoulder blade. To everybody else, they're thinking, well, obviously, he tapped the head and the arm. And then the first question they go is, did you really feel him touching you? And the person goes, yeah, like a real stab in my back. Do you know what I mean? And then that's it. Everybody can talk because it's cleaned itself up. And there's a lot that goes into making this routine happen. Yeah. You know, it's a lot of work.
There's one thing, just wanted to clarify. I mean, you probably understand it from watching the performances, but on that last point and the last supposed time when you're psychokinetically touching them and you tap the other spectator openly, you're tapping that spectator on the shoulder. So you want to, if they're sitting down, you want to start from a higher up position and come down like this so that the rest of the audience as a whole can see this finger come down.
That's it.
And that's when you're tapping the
second spectator.
Not the person that's...
I mean, if they sat down, one thing you could do is get them to stand up and turn them around and literally... Yeah. The idea is to openly display that you're touching the second person, and so that this person's feeling these imaginary invisible touches. But it's a good point because you don't want to be hiding your hand on this when you're displaying where you're going to be touching them. But like I say, listen to that key line where I go, how did that tap feel different to the taps that came before it? Well, they're answering, well, the two were softer and then firmer, but the answer to that when they go, it were firmer, solidifies that there were taps that come before this firm tap.
I mean, even if they got it wrong and said softer, they're still confirming that there were taps before that tap.
That's it.
Even if they say it felt the same, they're still confirming there were other taps. So it doesn't even matter if they answer incorrectly.
And I go, okay. And so that's that. And then that rolls real nicely. And then you've got your example, and everybody can talk afterwards because everything is going to be wrapped up, you know? So as I said, there is a lot of work necessary to make this effect happen. It is a ridiculous amount of remembering scripts and choreography and hiding moments.
Yeah.
But the results are 100% worth it. And each bit of it has been meticulously crafted to enable people to talk afterwards. You could encourage it and they'll never be able to pick it apart.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just one of those things. If they go, did he touch you on the head? Yeah. Did he touch you on the arm? Yeah. Did he touch you on the shoulder? Yeah. It's all going to fit and flow, and that's what I really love about it, you know. Have you got any more questions about that effect?
No, only practice, because as you say, there is a lot. But you can practice on your own in a room with 2 chairs if you have to. You might feel like an idiot, but it's worth it.
Listen,
because then once this is in your toolkit, you've got it with you everywhere, always.
Never think that, you know, like Mark was saying then about the empty chairs, never think that's a bad idea, because the way that I practice my mentalism, and I get asked this a lot, is I imagine like 6 or 7 participants around a table, and I go from being the best spectator, good spectator, okay, doesn't quite understand my instructions, idiot, somebody who's purposefully trying to mess me up, and I practice the effect, not just this effect, every effect, and I pretend I'm performing it on each one of these people. So now what happens is that when I get into a performance, as soon as I see somebody behaving a certain way, I go, okay, that's how I perform this effect for spectator 3. And I run down the course of how I deal with the, you know, if there's bits where I have to over-clarify certain things, or there's bits where somebody's refusing to write something, I instantly know how to segue into a performance for the person who's a skeptic. And if everything's running smooth, what you tend to find, and I find really weirdly, and I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, when you first start out, if there's a slight underconfidence in yourself as a performer, you find that this is the end or range of the table that you're performing to all the time. But the more that you become not slick but better at delivering and more confident and open, you find that this is your end of the table that you're performing to all the time.
Right, yeah.
It's really weird. It's like a really, you know, like these things that people find difficult, and that, you know, when I watched Devil's Picture Book for the first time and I'm watching like the psychological forces and the invisible deal and stuff, it were a real struggle for me to be able to hit that. And now I look back on stuff like that and I think, wow, they're the simplest things that, you know I could place a card down on the table and make sure it hits every time. But that's come down to just doing it so many times, you know. But that's a great way to practice, is with the empty chairs, and just tap the chairs and ask this person. And then also when you're practicing it, imagine this person's answered with 1 touch, 2 touches, 3, 4. Work out how you deliver the script in that scenario, because you've covered all bases then. If this person out and out says, oh, I'm not feeling anything, which shouldn't happen with this because it's a memory test, you know, well, it's framed as a memory test, then in that scenario, and I've never had that happen, but in this scenario, all that you do is you'd say, okay, let's change this up with somebody else, and then you move somebody else. That's it.
Yeah.
And they're watching it from a different perspective now. And if they go, they're going to watch it and go, wow. And it's also, I think, a little bit more credible that you aren't doing anything underhanded, or else this person would have felt something. You know, you could, even if you wanted to, thinking about it, it's a bit overkill. But imagine asking that person to close their eyes whilst you stood over there to start with. Then you do it and say, did you just feel me touch you? And if you get a yes at that point, you've got the most incredible thing ever, just based on suggestion. If you get a no, you say, okay, we might have to try this again with somebody else. And you sit somebody else in the chair, but now everybody's memory is that you asked them to close their eyes from over there and you were nowhere near.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That might be a bit of fun to experiment with. I don't know. Maybe I'm just gilding the lily.
There's a couple of other things. So it's quite nice sometimes if you've got the option of doing it with a couple, so a husband and wife, or maybe 2 sisters or something. So there's a link between connection. It could even be colleagues that work closely together or something. But that's quite nice, and I think, in my opinion, it's better than having 2 completely unrelated people. But that's a performance preference.
Yeah, it's if you can find something like that. Like another way to get into that, and just a couple of why she brought that up. But what I used to do is I used to do this thing where I'd pre-show an elderly couple, and one of them I'd pre-show like a page number in a book, so they'd read the first line and I'd get them to remember the page number. But what I do is I'd force the last word in that sentence to the other member of the couple.
Right, yeah.
Right? So now I'd bring this elderly couple up, or this couple that had been together for a long time, and I'd say, I can feel and see the connection that exists between the two of you, but nobody else can. So let me show them something that wouldn't work with anybody else. And I'd do PK touches as like the primary effect, but just before loading the PK touches up, I'd say, I want you to think of any sentence for me. Feel free to change your mind a number of times. So they would, and settle upon one using a few techniques. And obviously I pre-showed it, so I knew what sentence they were going to end up with. And I say, we'll come back to that in a second. For now, and then I'd do this, and then I'd get them to hold hands like they did on their wedding day. They stood looking into each other's eyes, and I'd say, on the count of 3, I want you to say out loud the last word in the sentence you're thinking of. And I want you to say out loud what you think the last sentence is. So I count to 3, 1, 2, 3, snap. Yeah. And they'd both say the same word, and I'd just look at the audience and go, how's that for finishing off each other's sentences? Yeah. Do you know, so that were a great little one. And then also you had, if you were doing it with like, if you're doing it with unrelated strangers, what you could do is you could get everybody around the table to go through the deck and pick a card at random, for example, and you could force a person like the 3 of hearts and then take it back and shuffle it, force this person and say, right, we'll see who's got the, you know, the closest connection or whatever, and 2 people have picked the same card, or 2 people have, that's it, yeah, the mate of it or whatever, and them 2 people have closely thought of the closest thing. Or you could, if you wanted to, and I think theatrically it's quite nice, is run a series of tests that are just random tests, like, you know, put a coin on the table, mix it up, okay, you're out and you're out. Now we'll do this, pick a drawing, you know, these 2 are close, until you whittle it down to 2 people and then move into it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's something quite cute about creating a false connection that didn't exist to justify this. But, you know, best friends, sisters, twins are even better for this stuff. Great.
Or, I don't know, like 2 police officers that work a beat together, or, you know, that sort of thing. Like it's, yeah, there's lots of opportunity. One other question I had for you.
Just about.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, great. It was just the police officer thing that you were saying. I mean, it doesn't mean out to anybody else, but you'll probably get something great out of this. Imagine doing it, right? And you know that the last touch is going to be the shoulder. Yeah. So you name all the different body parts, like areas where a homicide could have taken place. And you say to them, like, both of you pick the location of the murder based on where you felt it. Yeah. So now both of them pick the same destination for where the homicide took place or something. Sorry, I'm just going off on a little tangent. Cool, yeah. You know, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to ask you about how you felt this routine could fit into your act as a whole, like an opener or something you do at the end. And for me, I mean, I like the idea that you get that question where people ask, well, what exactly is it that you do? And it's so great with something like this to say, well, why don't I show you all? Why don't I show you what it is that I do? And I think that this is because it doesn't really explain what you do, but it gives people an idea about the sort of thing that it is, and without being very specific or putting labels on on your job or your skill.
I find that a lot of when I'm performing now, because it's more social situations, like I perform a lot more. I have very few paid gigs, and the only paid gigs that I really take, because unless the money's too good to turn down for the time scale, and that sounds really wrong, but I enjoy performing too much to turn it into something that I charge for. But you know, like I think the last gig I did, obviously, obviously coming out of COVID, I did the party that I was telling you about. And the last gig before that, other than my residency, were at a hedge fund managers, and I'd come from there and went straight to a magic convention. Yeah. And the money was so good that I did 12 minutes of performing. I couldn't turn it down. It was like, I'm going to be in that vicinity. You know what I mean? It's a half an hour drive to where I'm going. It'd be ridiculous for me to turn this down. So I did that, and sometimes, like I say, the money's too good to turn it down, but my preference is that I won't be bothered about performing. So I perform socially, and the way it's always somebody else introduces me, which is always the greatest thing. Like, obviously this paid part, I did this party maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that, a week ago, and it started outside, as I said to you, there's everybody in the different little groups, and everybody has a drink and gets together, and they broke an hour up over the night. But what really cool is after that first session, which we done early on to the small amount of people, later in the night it became, oh, you know, my auntie's just come, can you tell her what it is that you do, this, that and the other. And I often find that mentalism's better as an explanation to a question that's been asked. Like, you know, did you always realise that you could do this? Or is this something that, you know, a skill that would develop later? Or could you read, it must be horrible being in a relationship with you. And like the one routine that I always do, which is really silly at that point, is I'll go, well, you know, I've been single for a long time, and the reason I've been single for a long time is like, well, I'll show you. And now I do this thing which is, I don't know if I've ever showed you, but I ask somebody to think about a lie about themselves and then a truth about themselves. And the way that their eyes move, I can now tell without them saying out loud whether they're telling a lie or a truth. And I go, you were telling a lie there, weren't you? And they're like, how do you know that? I'm not even saying it out loud. Yeah. And I go, and that's why I can't be in a relationship. I said, because even silly little white lies, I'm picking up on it. It's not making me uncomfortable, but it makes the other person feel uncomfortable. And then I also think about the real world examples of when this is a negative thing. So like I'll go, you know, you think that this is something that's great and it's a wonderful gift to have, but it's not. I mean, imagine on Christmas Day being a kid and knowing what your presents are before you've opened them, or you're sat on a date and you know that the girl across from you or the person across from you doesn't want to be on the date with you. You know, they're sat there and they're just biding the time till they can get out of there, and you know that. Or when your best friends are telling you lies and you know that they're lying to you, but you're too polite to say anything. Or when your family are promising you this and you get that dreaded "we will see" line, but you know before they've ever hit that line that they never intended to do it. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of negatives that go with this as well as the positives. And then, you know, then you can like segue into these routines that metaphorically represent the answers that you're giving. I always find that my performances are so much better like that, you know. And just to go off on one final little tangent, I'm telling you this story about the double lift that I did the other day in the unit. You know, I'm building a 1966, or it's a 65, maybe a 65, I think, Mustang at the minute. And so a friend of mine owns a unit, and I go down to this unit. We've taken all the engine out, we've taken the gearbox out, we've dropped the axles off the bottom. And because we're in a unit, there's constantly different tradesmen from the other units, like popping in, oh, hi, how are you, you know, this, that and the other. And you get to know them all, and it's just like a little bunch of characters, but really great people. And every time it's, can you just show him what it is that you do? Can you just tell him about what it is you do? Or words hit some of the other units that, oh, there's this guy up there that can do this, this, this and this. Anyway, they come up, and I'd been under this car, my face is covered in dust and muck and everything else. I've got spray paint all over me. I'm just tired and I just didn't want to do anything. And the guy that owns the unit, Neil, he flirts with magic. So he's got like decks of cards and stuff like that. So I take this deck of cards and I decided to do the old double lift, have a look, name any card, cull it to the top. Was this your card? No. Put it in your hands. It's just a magic trick. It's just a magic trick, and one that you learn, one of your first tricks. Yeah. But I'd been talking to Neil about how the presentation's the thing that changes the way that somebody perceives the effect to be. You know, it's very easy to be able to perform an effect like that, but it is just a trick, you know what I mean? So, and I said, if I get a chance, I'll show you anyway. This was the perfect opportunity. So I've done this double lift. These guys, two of them have named this card. I've showed them it, they've put it into their hands, and obviously it's switched when you flip the double over and you're giving them the top card, the one that they called out loud. And so they're holding the 10 of hearts, they call out loud the jack of clubs, they're now holding the jack of clubs, they just don't know it. And I go through one of the inductions that's on this project, and they both stood there, and I said, now what's going to happen is I'm going to leave you in silence for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to tell you what I want you to do next. So I stay silent, so I'll show you what 5 seconds is exactly like. And that's 5 seconds, which is not a massive amount of time, but what I do is I wait about 8, 9, 10 seconds. So I've told them it's going to be 5 seconds, and I wait 10 seconds. And then I slowly say, keeping your eyes closed, take a deep breath in. And when I count from 1 to 3, I want you to open your eyes. 1, 2, 3, and they open their eyes, right? And I say to them, do you feel relaxed? And they go, yeah. And now I turn to Neil, who's at the side of me, and I go, do you see what I'm saying about how you can just get people to do whatever you want? And Neil's like, yeah. And they're looking at me like, what? And I said, well, I'm sure Neil will tell you later on exactly what it is that you did. Well, what did we do? And I said, well, you told me that you wanted the jack of clubs. I thought instead of trying to do some sleight of hand or whatever, I'd put you in a trance. I'd ask you to open your eyes, give me the card back that you're holding. I'd go through the deck, take out the jack of clubs, put it back in your hand, have you close your hands again and both close your eyes and completely forget you'd done it. Nah. And I said, well, there's only one way we'll be able to find out. You're holding on to the insurance. Let's have a look at it. So when they open their hands and they see that there's this jack of clubs, these two freak out now. And they're like, throw it at me. And they're like, and they're giving like profanities. And they leave. And I'm saying to Neil, look, you know, like it's same as a coin vanish. And I'd said this to Steve, another friend of mine. Making the coin disappear and reappear is great once. When you do it again a second time, they've seen it a third time is too much. But if you are going to make it disappear a third time, get somebody to hold onto your wrist and ask them about a vacation that they want to travel to, somewhere, anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter. And then say to them, I'm going to try to make this coin disappear. And when you go on that vacation, I want you to look around for it because you'll find it. So you said you want it to reappear in Turkey. So, and then you open your fingers nice and slow and it's gone.
Yeah.
And now that person's imagination, because they've seen it vanish and reappear, is enough to let them know you've done this incredible thing. But when they tell the tale later, it's not, oh, I made a coin disappear and reappear. It's, this guy made a coin disappear and made it reappear in Turkey. With no extra work.
Because they've got no way to disprove that second bit, but they want to tell the story as well because they were blown away by what they saw.
And that's it. And that's what's so brilliant about that thing. And same with the but I didn't think anything of it. And it wasn't until I saw Cole, which is the spray paint artist and the Windham, the next day. And Cole says, I heard you were hypnotising everybody last night in unit. Josh told me that, you know, he closed his eyes and he said he knew that he was out for more than 5 seconds, but he couldn't explain how long he'd been out for. And you had him doing all this stuff whilst they're under hypnosis. What else did you have him do? Don't look at my eyes, don't look in my eyes. And for me, I thought, wow, this...
All off a double lift.
Off of a double lift, and I thought, wow, like this is... But they're the little things that I'm talking about. You know, it's always important to try to see what other big thing. Again, I just couldn't be bothered, you know, like I was so tired, I didn't want to do a phone unlock. These people don't care about star signs, didn't want to try a birthday divination, didn't have the patience to do Midas touch. I just wanted to do something that would take me 30 seconds, milk it as much as I can, go back to doing what I was doing and then go home and go to bed.
Right.
So that's it. So I know it's a bit of a tangent, but it explains how to take this stuff and, you know, just...
These tangents are where the gold is, though. That's what's... Yeah.
Well, I hope so. I hope people can see that.
Yeah, and I hope they do, and that's why they should stick with this and listen to all of what we've got to say.
Well, thank you for listening. So let's move into ambidextrous. Ambidextrous is a really, really easy effect, and it sits in line with a formula that a lot of the other effects on this project adhere to. And that's it's a middle effect, and there's an effect that blankets it. It sort of sits in the centre of all that chaos. So before we begin, I'll show you what it looks like, and then I'll break it down piece by piece. So take a few seconds to do this, Mark. Don't do it straight away. Think about it. Can you think of the name of the first person that you kissed?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I don't know that person. I've not asked you to tell me who this person is. You know, there's nothing you've told me about that would give away who that person is. Just out of interest, are you predominantly left or right-handed?
Left-handed.
So you're left-handed. So I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're not here, you're somewhere more relaxing than here. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be?
On a beach in the Caribbean.
Okay, so close your eyes for a second and just imagine that you're on a beach in the Caribbean. You can hear the waves crashing. You can feel the warmth coming down on your face. And I want you to imagine that whilst you're there, you start to daydream. And in this daydream, you go back in time to the very first time you ever picked up a pen, even if it was just a crayon or something to write with. And instead of picking it up with your left hand, I want you to really see yourself picking it up with your right hand. And imagine that you take the piece of paper or wherever it is that you wrote on and you just start to scribble with your right hand, and it starts to feel natural. And now let this daydream progress until you go to the first day you were ever at school. At this point, you've used a pen, but not massively, and they start to give you the little dot to dots where you join up the letters to create your own name. And instead of using your left hand, you use your right hand. And you start to write with your right hand. And I want you to imagine that you start to do remedial tasks in your life using your right hand instead of your left. And then you come forward to the first time you ever went on a date. You see what this person looks like. Instead of reaching down and taking this person's hand with your left hand, you take that person's hand with your right hand. And as you imagine holding this person's hand, I want you just to bring yourself back from the daydream, bring yourself back from the Caribbean, and slowly open your eyes. Now, did it feel strange doing all of that with your right hand, or did it feel very natural?
Natural.
Natural. Every single thing in life starts from a seed. The greatest oak trees start from a seed. Have you ever heard of the butterfly effect?
Yes.
The idea that if you go back in time and change one tiny thing, it affects everything in our life here and now. You're predominantly left-handed, you said, but I had you go back in time and imagine being right-handed. Wouldn't it be interesting if you managed to physically manifest those thoughts? I'll tell you what, take the pen in your left hand. Does it feel natural or unnatural?
Unnatural.
Try to write your name using your left hand. Does it feel weird?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's have a look at it. Okay. It's not too bad. I'll tell you what. Put the pen in your right hand. Does that feel better, more natural?
Yes.
Write your name nice and largely there using your right hand. Look at the difference in speed, pace. Look how clean it looks. Yeah. Look at the difference. This with the left hand and this with the right hand. Which of those would you say is the best?
This one.
The one done with the right hand?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with a gift. From now until forever, you're going to be right-handed. The weird thing is that because you've gone back in time and changed that, if anybody ever asks you from this point, if anybody ever asks you whether you're left or right-handed, you will always say that you are right-handed. Always, not if you understand that. Interestingly, all that process allowed me to direct your thoughts in a very specific way. And by focusing on stuff that's slightly different to what you'd usually focus on, you unlocked one thing, one memory that you've not shared with anybody else. One secret that you've kept with you this entire time that you've never told another living soul. And I'm going to tell you what that secret is.
Wow. That's it, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Genuinely, nobody could have known that.
Nobody could know.
Perfect, thank you for playing. So let's break that down and explain how that all works. It's really simple. And it's one of those effects that I think is a really interesting one because it's again a form of body magic, but very easy body magic that, you know. And I had the idea after hearing about the hypnosis stooge. And so if you don't know the story of the hypnosis stooge, let me tell you what it is. So a hypnotist would go to a pub gig like a working man's club or whatever, and they do these suggestibility tests. And he found that nobody were suggestible. So he kept one of the people on stage and he said, just close your eyes for me. So the person closed their eyes and he leant in and whispered. He said, listen, mate, he goes, the show's not working. I'll give you 50 quid if you play along. I'll give you 50 quid at the end if you do what I say. Nod if you understand and you agree. So the guy nods. So he now gets this guy doing all manner of things, you know, clucking like a chicken, barking like a dog, kissing a broom. Everybody's laughing and having a good night. And at the end of the show, he tells the guy to close his eyes. So the guy closes his eyes and he goes, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to wake up. And you're going to be convinced that hypnosis is not real and that I offered you £50 to play along and pretend all night. So when I count from 1 to 3, open your eyes and you'll be convinced I offered you £50. 1, 2, 3. The guy opens his eyes and goes, you did, you offered me 50 quid. And of course now the entire audience laugh because they're like, wow, like it's worked. And this guy can't get the 50 quid and he's in a double bind, right? And I thought, what an interesting concept. And that was the sort of starting point for these effects that exist within effects. It's almost like Matryoshka-esque, you know, the little Russian dolls, the doll inside the doll. And this one's a really easy one. Again, it uses that line that's the formula on this set where it's, I have a strange way of getting inside somebody's head. My process is not a crystal ball or tarot cards or a pendulum. Mine is that I have to get somebody to envision something that never was. And I tell them I say, which hand do you write with? And they go, the right hand. Now, this is before the performance. And I go, okay, I'm going to ask you if you write with your right or your left hand, and I want you to tell me you write with your left hand. Usually the line that I'd add when they answer left is I go, and I'll ask you if you've ever been able to write with your right hand. And I want you to say, not very well. And that'll just get me into that frame of mind to be able to start doing this. It sounds weird, but just trust me. And I say, oh, before we go any further, write down the name of the first person that you ever kissed. And now I do the shuffle peak that I have explained elsewhere on this set. And so I know the information. And I say, I'm going to try to pick up on that later on. That's it. And so now, when I roll into the performance, obviously the setting's important. You know, you won't be doing it sat at a table like this with somebody.
Yeah.
This is best done. If the best case scenario for something like this would be somebody who prides themselves on their penmanship. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, imagine if you had like a handwriting analysis expert or something like that, or a graphologist. It'd be great for them, you know what I mean? Or somebody who's an English teacher or something you know, somebody like that. So bide your time and ask, is there anybody that's a teacher?
Or a sign writer.
Something like that. Somebody that deals with stuff like that. Now, when you roll into this, it's almost like you're giving them a gift. The closing line on this, and it's a little bit hammy, but it works, is if anybody ever asks you, and I normally get them to go back into a trance, if anybody ever asks you, you were always right-handed, you were never left-handed. You'll forget from now until forevermore that you were ever left-handed and open your eyes, which is the whole hypnotist line of, you did offer me 50 quid. Do you know what I mean? It just sort of cleans that up. But the spectator is getting the revelation of the name. The name's obviously pre-showed. I just peeked it before the performance. Again, you could do it when you're table hopping, or you could do it when you get 5 minutes with somebody just before the rest of a group of friends turn up. Find your time to do it. And now, what I don't want is, I don't want you watching this set and thinking, oh, everything's got to be done pre-show, because it doesn't. I mean, there's only really the try principle and this. But one thing that I'd say is, you could do this real time if you wanted. You could have somebody close their eyes. The problem with stage whispers, and let me tell you, this is an issue I have when I read a lot of mentalism. And a lot of mentalists just do not seem to get this. It's like it eludes them, right? They'll decide to get somebody to close their eyes at the start of something. Then they'll whisper I'm going to whisper to you a set of instructions. Now open your eyes. Now this incredible thing happens in between. Yeah. And everybody just thinks, oh, they just whispered what they wanted them to do. Yeah. That's not impressive.
Told them to play along.
That's it. Or, you know, they just whispered what they wanted them to say, or they whispered the instructions or whatever, which is, if the instructions were innocent, then why would you be whispering them? It makes no sense. The difference between magic and hypnosis, or something that's presented as hypnosis, is it's completely justified to whisper suggestions, because that's what you imagine a hypnotist doing. You see them close your eyes and they put them in this trance. Now I'm going to give you a suggestion. Now they give them a suggestion. You know, you could even stay, and if they ever watch a television show on hypnosis, this is a fact that they do this. We've cut the induction process out because it's illegal to transmit on television, just in case anybody else falls asleep. So you could say, I'd usually do these suggestions out loud, but the problem is if it affects one of you when I'm not here, I aren't going to be able to fix that. So I'm going to just whisper the suggestion. If I tell you to play along, or I tell you to do something that sounds like I'm asking you to think of a piece of information or whatever, call me out. So now you've set yourself up for the fact that you're doing this to benefit them. And it justifies itself in the context and confines of the routining. You could literally lean in and whisper, in a moment when I ask you which hand you write with, I want you to answer the opposite hand to what you write with. And you'll understand why when we get into this. And I also want you to, when I ask you if you can write with the other hand, the hand that you do write with, say, no, not very well. It's my process to be able to read your mind. Now, instead of doing this with an effect that involves having them write something down and figuring it out afterwards, you could do any prediction-based type effect where you're going to add numbers up, or there were going to be a definitive outcome at the end of it, and you're just shifting what the effect is.
Yeah.
but it's meaning that you can do this real time and the suggestion's there, and you tell them to open their eyes, and then you go on from there. And the suggestion, it could even be something as simple as, I'm going to whisper to you to get you into a trance state. Do you know what I mean? And so you could then at the end of that say, if you were to think about yourself in any place in the world, you say out loud now where it'd be, and you'd go, Barbados, like that. So they hear Barbados. Yeah. And I go, and then I lean out and go, okay, so just imagine yourself in Barbados, doing exactly what I just told you to do in your ear. Let yourself sink down into that relaxed state we talked about. So now it seems like you were just telling them how to relax and how to get into a trance. And when they say Barbados, you can run it down. Again, like I said.
That's great. That's really powerful in itself.
That's it. It's because it looks like it's just the induction, which is obviously covered a little bit on the inductions, but there's a lot of information in the tangents. And again, there'll be a lot of this that you'll figure out as you're doing it, because it just happens naturally. It's like you'll figure out where certain whispers work. Like you'll notice at the end, I didn't say to you the name of the person that you first kissed. Yeah. I said, let me tell you a secret, something you've never told another living soul, that you kept to yourself this entire time. And I lean in and just say, the first kiss was Lily, right? And then I get the reaction, right? Yeah. And that gives you that punch, and everybody's like, what did he whisper to you? What did he say? Yeah. But now the brilliance with this is, because you pre-showed the name of the first date, even if this person decides, oh, well, he told me that my first kiss and my first date were Lily, it looks like you were reading their mind through the memories that they went through during the presentation, which then strengthens the fact that you must be reading somebody's mind. And so it becomes self-justifying, and I think that's a really important factor. So when you're thinking about the framework of your whispers and where you're placing these suggestions, think about the logical reason why. I even read and this is true, I'm not going to say who it was, I read a PDF recently, and this lad sent me it, and he said, like, can you read it? And I said, give me some time to read it, don't push me. It's going to take me a few weeks, I'm traveling, I'm just getting back to recording and everything else. Every day, have you read it? Have you read it? Have you read it? And one day I bit the bullet, sat down and started to read it. And it said, whisper what you need, the dual reality, to the person, and then turn to everybody else and go, in fact, let me tell you what I just whispered, and then says what was not in the whisper out loud and says, the participant will never say, they'll never say you didn't whisper that to me. It were like two different things. It were like, I whisper what I need you to do, and then go, let me tell you what I just whispered. So the entire whisper's then a waste of time, right? The entire whisper's like a waste of time. Whenever I were putting a whisper into a mentalism routine, I'd always do this. I'd always go, do you mind if I give you a reading? Now, I'm going to be really honest, but sometimes I do get a little close to the bone without knowing I'm doing it. So if at any point at all I feel that something might be a little bit like this, I'll whisper it and I'll clear it with you first before I tell everybody else. And if you're not happy with me telling everybody else, you just say, I'll keep that between us. And it's not a problem at all. So now I'd start to give my reading, and then I'd lean in and I'd whisper, and I'd go, okay, like I'm gonna ask you if you're all right with me repeating these instructions back to everybody else. Like, if you don't want me to go through it all again for saving time, just say to me, keep it between us. If you are happy for me to share the instructions, I'll just share the instructions to keep the time down. So now, when I'd say, now, are you happy for me to tell everybody what I just said to you, or do you want to keep it between us? The person would say, I'll tell them. And I'd go, okay. And now I'd say back some of the reading that I said in your ear. And then I said, and he also said, just for clarity, that I wanted you to sit with your feet flat on the floor, your hands on your leg, you're relaxed, you're taking a deep breath in, and you're focusing on a secret nobody else would know. And that's exactly what I said to you, right? Yeah. And so now they say yes, and I say, I had to check with the reading that you were comfortable with me telling you that, because it might have been an area that were a grey area, because you'll understand the meaning more than anybody else. So it were almost like I were clarifying it. And I always thought that were a brilliant way to do anagrams. Because when you were doing an anagram, you'd say, if there's any bits that I'm picking up on that I'm not sure about, I'll whisper to you. And I'd lean in and go, there's an R in your star sign, right? Yeah, and an A as well. There's an I in there. And then you'd go, no. And I'd lean out and go, all right. Just to clarify, you're not the sort of person that let your friends down in a time of crisis. And you'd go, no. And I go, okay. And so it looked like the no that you just
Yeah.
give me with a no to the question that I just asked.
Yeah.
And to everybody else, because they'd never seen the anagram, now I could continue the reading and say, like, I'm going to share a couple of the things that I whispered in your ear. I won't share all of it because I know some of it is private. And then I'd just share little sprinklings. And then I'd give the rest of the reading out loud and I'd go, that's typical behaviour of somebody who's a Taurus.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then I'd nail the star sign and everybody would think the star sign had just come out of nowhere. Because I thought about the framework of where to apply the whisper.
Sure. Yeah.
And it really just, I just sit there and think, you've got this really great effect. I mean, even the effect that the guy sent me were good. But it all fell apart because of that one little thing that had not been looked at properly. You know, if I said to you, I think I've picked up on a secret. I'm not sure. Do you want me to say it out loud or do you want me to whisper it first? You could say, whisper it. And then you could just make a Barnum statement up at that point. Well, that gives you your in to whisper. They're the one that's requested the whisper. Do you know what I mean? And another little thing, I know this sounds daft, but another little thing that I came up with, I call them innocent and dirty cards. And I thought this were really nice. I'd have two cards and one would say free thinker and one of them would say analytical thinker, right? And this one would say free thinker, this is how you get in the correct frame of mind these are the instructions to get in the correct frame of mind for me to be able to work with you. And this one, and I'd pass these around the group. And on this one, what I'd have is free thinker and analytical. But it'd say, like, let's say in this routine, it'd say, number one, put your feet flat on the floor, which is the first thing that they'd see, right? Number two. So now they'd see these physical things. You know, when you get to this number two, when you get to the end of what's number 6, put this piece of card face down and close your eyes. And they'd be the same. But instructions 3 and 4 would be, when I ask you what your dominant hand is, reply with the exact opposite hand.
Yeah.
If I ask you, can you write with your dominant hand, say no. So now all I do is when I take these back like this, I'd put the pack down on the table and I'd say, so which are you? Are you a free thinker or analytical thinker?
And you switch those for the two that have the covert instruction.
That's it.
For swapping the hand.
And I'd say, now everybody else knows what, and I'd flash, everybody else knows what these say, but you take hold of it. Follow the instructions to the letter.
Yeah.
So now you get to number 6, you'd put it back on the stack and you'd close your eyes. So everybody else now thinks you've just read the instructions and taken your time to really figure out. And now the secret instructions been instilled in you, but nobody thinks to question them because they've already read them themselves.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I call those the innocent and dirty cards, but it's a great little thing, especially in something like
That's
this.
really useful in many ways, yeah.
Because you can just instill like secret instructions that you want. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's better. I think it's better than a whisper because you're showing everybody and you say, look, just take a few seconds to just briefly read these.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds to read them so you fully understand and know what it is that you're doing. If you don't follow this won't work. There's 2 kinds of people. Now, which are you, a free thinker or analytical? So we've already looked at these, but you could take that. And that's it, you're done. And you say, now look at all the instructions and follow them 100%.
I like that a lot, yeah.
It's a tiny little thing, but I think it's great, you know. But yeah, so that's ambidextrous. You're just literally asking them to tell you the opposite hand, like to what it is that they write with. And if I ask you, can you write with your dominant hand? You say no. That's my process to get inside your mind. You've asked them about the first date. So when you come back to revealing the first date at the end, it looks really brilliant. And at the same time now, you know, you've given them the gift of being right-handed for the rest of their life. And what's really great about this type of thing, and I'll explain why it's brilliant, and a little added touch, and then we'll end this effect, is, have you ever seen a left-handed person try to use a screwdriver or a pair of scissors? Like, it's a proper struggle for them. Like, a lot of things are made for right-handed people. So,
Screwdriver.
yeah, like people struggle to use them because when we turn them, we know it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
Okay, yeah.
So we turn outside to tighten. They have to turn inside to tighten. So it's much more difficult for them.
Because of the wrist strength.
That's it. It's much more difficult for them, right? And there's like loads of like little things like that's the thread on the screw, you know.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird thing because my brother's left-handed, so I'd know little things that I take for granted that I'd see him do, you know what I mean? Like little things, like for example, riding a bike where our predominant brakes on the right hand and our soft ones on the left hand, you know, and little things like that. And like we don't think when we're using a gear stick on that side, But to them, like it's all backwards. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I suppose you get used to it. But what's really great is that if you wanted to push in while you're giving them this gift, what you could say is I want you to close your eyes and I'm going to give you a gift. I know how difficult it is because my brother's also left-handed or my cousin's left-handed, and they complained about the fact that they couldn't use a screwdriver and they struggled with scissors and everything were difficult then because the world's predominantly made for right-handed people. So from this day forth, you're going to be right-handed and you're going to be able to unlock all those things that you've always wanted to unlock or whatever, and you'll never be left-handed again. And if anybody ever asks you, it's now instilled in your brain that you're right-handed, you'll say, it's always felt like I were right-handed. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you're giving him the gift because it's difficult being a left-handy in a right-handed world. But yeah, so that's ambidextrous. Any more input on that?
Yeah, just one thought, and I don't know if this is something, and it's not a fully thought-out idea, but I wondered about if at the beginning, during the pre-show or induction process, you could tell them that you were going to give them a gift then, and the gift you're going to give them is that you're going to be able to improve their handwriting. So this is like a really nice idea, and then at the end, so it's sort of like this is what the whole process is about. This is a therapy to improve their handwriting. And then at the end, you've left with this really stark example between these two different handwritings. And you can almost create a dual reality and asking, so can you see how much better your handwriting is now? And of course, they're answering yes in reference to the one drawn with their non-dominant hand. But to everybody else, it's like you have given them that gift, and it's...
That's great. See, it's little things again like this that just sprinkle over the top that make it really powerful and strong. So I'm happy there at that one. I mean, we've been here for a long time now, so it's starting to get to the point where we're like, I'm hoping I'm not taking too much of your time up.
I'm loving it. Yeah, it's great.
You know, but yeah, so that's ambidextrous.